They said she was just the girl next door. Nothing more, nothing less. Quiet, respectful, always early for work. The kind of woman who held the elevator for you, smiled without saying too much, and disappeared into the rhythm of the city. In a neighborhood where names were often forgotten, hers was remembered only in passing. Nobody suspected she was watching everything, recording, calculating, remembering. She blended into the background with the skill of someone who knew the danger of being seen too clearly. Her name was Alana Briggs, a 32-year-old systems analyst, or so the files said. Black, single, kept to herself. To the people around her, Alana was safe, familiar, and altogether ordinary. She took the bus like everyone else. She volunteered on weekends. She brought pies to community gatherings. But beneath that carefully worn smile was a different reality, one that no one saw coming. Alana worked for a covert intelligence unit within a US federal agency. Her assignment wasn't just about national security, it was about protecting her community from the inside, dismantling the quiet violence of systemic injustice by exposing the hands behind it. It began 5 years earlier, after the murder of her younger brother Jamal, during what the media labeled a routine traffic stop. Alana disappeared for a year. The family said she went to grieve. What they didn't know was that she had entered one of the most secretive counterintelligence training programs in the country. It wasn't revenge that drove her. It was the need for change, for justice, for a system where young black men like Jamal weren't seen as threats, but as lives worth protecting. Alana was brilliant, her scores unmatched, her resolve unshakable. She specialized in digital forensics and socio-political intelligence. Within months, she was quietly inserted into operations designed to monitor extremist infiltration in law enforcement. She was tasked with getting close, staying silent, collecting proof, and she did it all without anyone suspecting a thing. Until the day it all fell apart. The arrest was public, dramatic, designed to humiliate. She was charged with impersonating a federal agent, data theft, and obstruction of justice. Her face was splashed across news networks, her name dragged through the mud. The footage showed her being pulled from her apartment in handcuffs, head held high, lips sealed. Neighbors looked on in confusion. Some shook their heads, others whispered, "I always thought she was too quiet." What the public didn't see were the files she had already transmitted to secure servers. Evidence of illegal surveillance programs targeting black activists, internal memos exposing officers with white supremacist affiliations, data trails leading to private prisons profiting off unjust arrests. Alana knew this day would come. Her entire operation had been a race against time. In prison, she was isolated. Solitary confinement. No visitors. They tried to break her spirit, but word had already begun to spread. First, it was a small article on an independent black news outlet, then a podcast episode, then protests. Questions began rising. Who was Alana Briggs, really? Why were federal agencies silent? Why were sealed court documents being rushed through the system? The movement grew. Young women wore shirts with her name. Artists painted murals across cities. The girl next door was a spy, became a symbol, a reminder that justice often wears a quiet face, that sometimes the fight doesn't look like marching in the streets, but gathering intelligence in silence. Her story became a call to action. 6 months into her imprisonment, a whistleblower came forward. Someone from inside the agency confirmed what activists had already begun to suspect. Alana's arrest had been political, a silencing strategy, the charges manufactured, the trial a cover-up. Suddenly, the same networks that had dragged her name began asking questions. Congressional hearings were held, investigations reopened. The same system that had locked her up was now forced to explain itself. Alana was released quietly, without apology. No press conference, no compensation. Just a signed document and a gate that opened one early morning. She stepped out with the same calm resolve she had entered with. And while the country debated, analyzed, and dissected the legal aftermath, Alana returned to her neighborhood not as the girl next door, but as a symbol of resistance. She never gave interviews, never wrote a book, but she spoke through action. Community programs began popping up, anonymous funding, tech labs for youth, legal aid clinics. No one could prove she was behind them, but everyone knew. What made Alana's story powerful wasn't just the espionage or the betrayal. It was the dignity with which she moved, the pride she carried in her silence, the courage it took to weaponize invisibility. In a world that tried to flatten her into a stereotype, she rewrote the script. In every city where her story was told, a quiet message remained: never underestimate the girl next door. They tried to erase her, but Alana left fingerprints on the hearts of those who had long been ignored, discarded, or deliberately silenced. Her arrest may have been quieted by legal walls and sealed documents, but her impact echoed far beyond the courtroom and the steel bars that briefly held her. Her freedom, when it came, didn't come wrapped in justice. It came wrapped in questions, in cautious glances, in unresolved rage. Yet she carried it with the same quiet dignity. She had carried everything, with a calm that disturbed those who relied on chaos to cover truth. She walked out of that prison not as a free woman in the legal sense, but as a liberated one. And liberation doesn't beg for validation. It builds, it heals, it plants seeds in soil once poisoned by prejudice. Alana didn't speak to reporters. She didn't appear on any talk shows or publish a memoir. She declined every documentary offer. Instead, she went back to her roots, not for nostalgia, but to rebuild. The neighborhood that once called her ordinary now regarded her with awe and with guilt, because they, too, had not seen her. And perhaps that was the lesson she had wanted all along. Change, when it's real, doesn't always announce itself. It moves in whispers and works in the margins, just like Alana had. Within months of her quiet return, whispers of new programs began to surface. A tech center opened on the east side, fully funded, no visible donors. Kids who had never touched a computer before were learning to code. Across town, a legal aid clinic opened for families facing wrongful eviction and criminal charges they didn't understand. The staff, young, brilliant, mostly black attorneys fresh out of law school, fully funded for 3 years. A scholarship program appeared, then a crisis counseling center for black youth. No one could prove she was behind it, but everyone knew. Alana's influence was never about the spotlight. It was about structure. She understood systems, the way they operated, the way they were built to exclude and punish, but she also understood how to build new ones in their shadow, stronger and cleaner. She used the same intelligence strategies that once infiltrated corruption to now infiltrate hopelessness, not with noise, with opportunity. Still, the weight of her silence became its own kind of legend. People speculated, some accused, others romanticized. But those closest to her understood. The cost of what she had done could never be repaid in fame. It wasn't about being seen now. It was about making sure others never had to disappear just to survive. Then came the letter. It arrived at a small, independent black newspaper in Baltimore. No return address, handwritten. Inside were names, documents, dates, a detailed map of a prison lobbying scandal involving high-ranking officials and falsified crime statistics targeting black neighborhoods. The story exploded within days. The connections were undeniable. Protests followed investigation, followed resignations, but what caught the attention of activists wasn't just the impact, it was the handwriting. Those who knew Alana's case recognized the print, and just like that, the myth became movement again. Young organizers began tracing her timeline. Students dissected her methodology. She became case studies in classrooms she'd never visited. Her story was no longer just one of espionage and betrayal, it was one of strategy, of endurance, of ethical rebellion. She had taught an entire generation that power didn't only lie in resistance, but in resilience, in refusing to be erased. Despite the renewed attention, Alana remained a ghost, visible only through her work. But that didn't mean she wasn't watching. She always was. when a group of teenage girls in Chicago created a digital safety app for protesters. They received anonymous funding and tech support. When a young man in Atlanta was falsely accused of cybercrimes, his defense team showed up 2 days later, paid in full. Each time, the fingerprints were invisible, but undeniable. Years passed, but her silence never softened. If anything, it became louder. In a world that thrives on spectacle, her refusal to be consumed became its own act of defiance. Her quiet became a mirror, and in that mirror, many saw themselves black, brilliant, and too often underestimated. One day, during a youth conference on digital activism, a teenage girl stood during the Q&A session. Her voice trembled as she asked the panel, "What do we do when they try to make us invisible?" A hush fell over the room, and just before the next speaker could respond, a woman from the back stood up. She wore no badge, no name tag, just calm eyes and a familiar stillness. She said, "You don't fight to be seen, you fight to be undeniable." And then she sat back down. No one had to ask her name. Alana Briggs didn't need statues or street names. Her revolution lived in code, in policy, in possibility. She had rewritten the story of what resistance could look like: one woman, one mission, one buried truth at a time. And though the system had tried to label her, to confine her to headlines in courtrooms, she had slipped through every attempt like wind through bars. Not because she was invincible, but because she had chosen a different kind of power, the kind that doesn't seek permission, the kind that changes everything. So the next time someone tells you that the girl next door is just another face in the crowd, remember her story. Remember that behind the quiet smile and the ordinary clothes, there may be a mind calculating justice, a soul ready to endure, and a heart carrying the memory of every brother, every sister who was lost before their time. She was never just the girl next door. She was the storm that silence created, and her story isn't over. It's only just begun.